Right. All right, everyone, welcome to the workshop for the Society of Law and Government. The way this will work is that for about the first half, I'll present some more scriptural or theologically based thoughts on integrating faith and law and government, and just to lay kind of a common foundation for us all. And then Vishal will lead the second half with more organizational items. Our goal is to be done in an hour. So with all that said, let's go ahead and just dive right in. These are the questions I'm going to cover today before I hand it over to Vishal. Sorry, I think I didn't really update the PowerPoint here, but questions are: what is the gospel? What does the gospel have to do with work? What does the gospel have to do with law and government? How has Christianity transformed law and government? What is the state of law and government in North America today? And how can we start to think about applying Christian principles to law and government today? So first, what is the gospel? I know I've said this a couple of times, even in past events, but the gospel is fundamentally the announcement that in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, God has acted to reconcile all things to himself. And this has all kinds of implications once we believe it. This means that we are saved from, personally, we are saved from sin, wrath, death, and the devil. It means that socially we are able to participate in a new kind of human society that operates on the basis of mutual care, mutual service, love, and not on the basis of power or exploitation. And it also means that the final destination of this universe is not destruction and death, but it's actually eternal life in the glory of God. And so that's why at the end of Revelation, the picture we have is the reunion of heaven and earth as the New Jerusalem comes down from the heavens and comes down on the earth. So another way to state the gospel is to say simply, it's the statement, Jesus is Lord. Jesus is the crucified and risen Messiah and Lord of the entire world. And when we believe that, that means that the lordship of Jesus has implications for all of life. So what implications does the gospel have for our work? I talked about this in the 2018 youth conference. I'm not going to go into I'm not going to be very detailed about this now, but I might highlight some things that have particular relevance for people who work in law and government. The gospel gives you a new identity without which work could crush you. The gospel gives you confidence in the dignity of all work. The gospel, well, let me just say something about that actually. When I was more junior in, especially like government work, a lot of times you get interesting jobs that are not, they're interesting, but they're so like niche, and they're not really the reason you first like wanted to get involved. They're not the super interesting policy problems, right? Or a new lawyer, a lot of times what they're doing is not preparing to take the case and present it in court. What they're doing is trawling through all the discovery documents and just writing up, brief memos for the partners who are going to be arguing the case in court. The gospel tells you that even that menial work matters, right? Like even that lesser work that doesn't really give you any kind of status, it actually matters that you perform your job well. Martin Luther called this the ministry of competence, right? Like just by doing your job well, you are glorifying God and you're serving your neighbor. And so the gospel kind of frees us from this need to have work be this thing that feeds my ego. The gospel also gives you a moral compass. And I will say, like, especially for me working in politics, like that's something, it very quickly, you start to get into decisions that might make you feel more and more uncomfortable morally. They might start to stray from some of your principles. And the gospel kind of, when you remind yourself of the truth of the gospel, the fact that you don't have to be afraid if you take a stand and you suffer consequences for it, because in reality, you have already inherited all things. You're not really risking anything. You have a true north, right? Like Jesus Christ, who is the real moral compass for you. It kind of helps you be willing, like it doesn't make you perfect, right? But it just is a check on that incentive to be as ruthless as other people are in order to get ahead. The gospel also gives you a new worldview, without which work would be your master rather than your servant. There are a lot of jobs that can't properly be pursued until you have an idea of what human beings are for. And as a Christian, you have to bring your Christian faith to bear on that, to inform you on how you do your job. And finally, the gospel gives you hope in the midst of frustration, without which work would crush your spirit. So let's talk a little bit more specifically on what the gospel has to do with law and government. Well, if Jesus is Lord, that means his lordship extends over all law and all governments. And I know that might be jarring to hear, because people might be asking, what about the separation between church and state, Brian? But just stay with me now. I'm not talking about how things are worked out politically necessarily in the first instance. I'm just stating theologically, if Jesus is Lord of the world, then logically he has to be sovereign over all law and all governments. And the way this has worked itself out in society over the last 1,000 years is that because there is this sense that law and government is accountable to something higher, there's a check placed on government. There's some sort of moral authority to which we can appeal to protest against government, or to change laws, to advocate for the changing of laws. So how did this work itself out in practice? How did Christianity actually transform law and government in history? There was this beginning from this confidence that true justice can be found in God, and specifically in the story of Jesus that were presented in the Gospels. Early Christians began to believe that we can measure the justice of human authority or human law by stacking them up against the teachings of Jesus, or against what they call the natural law, as sovereignly set up by God. And this idea that law must accord with the justice of the Creator, as seen in Scripture and from nature, was best articulated by the medieval Catholic scholar Thomas Aquinas in his Summa Theologica. So this idea that law and government can be held accountable to a higher law was huge for the civil rights movement in the United States, for example. If you read Martin Luther King Jr.'s A Letter from a Birmingham Jail, you see that his argument rests on the fact that all human laws must be held to account to the higher divine law, and that if human laws are out of step with the divine law, then men and women have the right and even the moral obligation to peacefully disobey those laws. So what's the state of law and government in North America today? What are some of the challenges? I think one of the scary things about our current political moment is that when it comes to the world of law and government, the old confidence that there is such a thing as objective justice found in God that we can measure law and government against has fallen apart. And there are a lot of different reasons for that. It used to be that you had a more homogenous society that was more directly rooted in the church and in Christian culture. And in North America, we've opened up immigration a lot, and that's been a blessing for a lot of people. And we've let a lot of people from different religious backgrounds come here. But that has complicated our ability to make these kind of religious appeals to our government. And so instead of trying to work that out in a way that is respectful of all people, we have instead, I think, began to return to the old pagan view that might makes right, but in a new kind of form. And I think this can be shown in the several challenges specifically facing law and government in North America today. First, there's the challenge of political polarization. There had already been an ideological sorting that had been going on for 30 to 40 years now, especially in the United States, separating out liberals from conservatives. But what is new and dangerous is that this sorting now has the potential of hardening along racial lines as well, with each group trying to assert power and dominance over the other group. Second, there's the decline in trust in experts. Some of that decline is deserved because the so-called experts proved to be wrong about a lot of different things over the years. But the overall impact of less trust in experts is that it becomes a lot harder to resolve debates on certain issues because we don't trust that the experts are being neutral in what they say. And we also don't even share the same basic facts about what is going on. And finally, there's the reality that as we have become less confident in justice as an objective concept, more and more people are cynically exploiting the legal profession and the policy and political worlds to simply advance their status. They don't really care about the truth of an issue. They don't really care about the overall justice of an issue. They adopt positions that will help them advance professionally. And this is what I call the will to power in the PowerPoint. It's when the power, it stems from this belief that the powerful person gets to make the rules. And so if you're smart, you're savvy, you'll try and get as much power for yourself so that you can make the rules. And this is leading to a lot of destructive and evil consequences. So how can we start to think about applying Christian principles to law and government today? This is an area that I have thought a lot about because it's where I actually work. But I don't want to preempt the discussion with the way I've kind of thought about this already. What I hope will happen through this group that will form is that we can discuss this and learn from one another. Knowing the gospel and staying rooted in the gospel, I would like for this group to engage with these kinds of questions, not just intellectually, but also at the level of professional practice as lawyers and workers in government. And to help us get started on that, I would like for us to spend this first year together studying this book on political theology, Awaiting the King by James K. Smith, who's actually originally a Canadian, for all you Canadians out there. He did move to the United States though, so I'm just saying. This book is about how the practices of the church equip Christians to engage in politics for the sake of the common good of everyone. So Christians have this capacity because of the gospel. Jamie Smith is arguing in this book. Christians have the capacity to practice politics, to participate in politics in a non-self-interested way. I don't think that's the way people perceive Christians in politics in North America today. I think people see Christians, especially in the United States, as just another political tribe trying to defend their own rights and not serving the common good. But I think this book makes an argument that that's not the way it has to be, that Christians can actually be the bridge builders and peacemakers in society. So I hope and pray that our time together studying the book will prove fruitful and will lead to creative mission in North America. That's all I had to share with you guys this morning, and with that, I'll turn it over to Vishal.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to see all of you here today. Just to give you some context and introduce myself, I'll start off by saying who I am. I'm from Seaside Christchurch, Toronto. I currently work at Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada. And I guess that would be the equivalent of the Department of Commerce over there in America. And I'm also completing my master's in public policy and public service. And to give you some context, Bryan asked me to spearhead this movement, the CSI, Society of Law and Government, and lead it in its initial stages. So we'd eventually like this society to be more formalized, and we would elect board members with a president, vice president, and other members. And we would also like to incorporate each and every one of your ideas for our society before we move forward. And that's why we have this meeting for today. We'd like to know what you want out of this society. So I've jotted down some ideas for us for the next couple of years, and I'm open to feedback. In terms of the intentions of creating this society, I think it's important to understand theology and apply it to our professions. And in our profession in law and government, it's important to have a Christian lens when looking at policy problems. Obviously, when starting off in your careers, as a junior person on your team, it's hard to influence policy, but it's important to be open and think about Christian perspectives and responses when looking at different laws and policies. And it's important to be a Christian thinker, an active Christian thinker in your profession. It's also imperative to hold on to all these different perspectives and apply it once you become a senior member in your department or your team. And to influence policy as a senior member, it's important to understand what the Bible says about many of these problems that are facing our communities. So, as a group, I think it's important to study what the Word says about the different issues and gain a theological perspective in relation to public policy before we actually go ahead and take action and bring these ideas to our profession. And in doing so, Bryan has introduced this book, and I think we can take time with reading it. I don't want it to be a burden on all of you, so I think if we have a session maybe once every 3 months to discuss the chapters, I think that would be a great idea. There's around 220 pages in the book, so if we could do 50 to 55 pages every 3 months, I think that's very manageable for all of us. And I guess I can buy the book and maybe upload a PDF for all of us. Um, that's one way of learning about the Christian background on policy. Another way we can learn is starting a WhatsApp group, if all of you have WhatsApp. Bryan and I actually share interesting articles with each other here and there related to politics, public policy, law, and its relation to Christianity. So this is another way we can build up our understanding of Christian perspectives on public policy. And if you feel free to add whatever articles that you may find interesting, feel free to post it into the WhatsApp group if you feel inclined to. And after a year of reading the book, the articles, having discussions and doing a lot of learning, I think we'd have a good understanding and a grasp of what the Bible says about different issues, and we'd be able to respond to different policy issues with a Christian perspective. So this leads to some of the ideas that I have for our society. I think it would be unified if we had a unified, I think it would be great if we had a unified voice and speak about different policy issues that are facing our community. So first off, I think we can start off with a basic thing. We can present our findings to all the youth at the conference next year, or the youth conference that's happening in 2022. That's one thing we can do. And then one of my other ideas that I actually thought about 2 days ago. So personally, I enjoy reading the work that think tanks do, and I take the time to read their policy solutions and recommendations to various problems that our communities face. And I think it would be cool and useful if we have a yearly publication where we address some of the policy issues that both of our countries are facing. I obviously don't want the publication to be controversial, so we can pick issues that every Christian can easily agree on and issues that we're united on. So some of the issues that I thought about are inequality, those who face inequality in racialized communities, inequality faced by women. We can address poverty, discrimination, and for most people, climate change is an issue. With that, I'm hoping that we'd be able to give a Christian perspective on these issues, present policy solutions, and also back up our arguments based on facts. All of us have our own ways of thinking, of course. We have our different political affiliations, but I think it's important for us to remain objective throughout the process. And if we do have different positions and ideas on how to produce solutions, I think our publication would be unique in that all of us involved would be able to state our solutions and our opinions. Obviously, I know that you all are busy and that you guys have things to do such as work in school. So I think a yearly publication would work for all of us. The only time that I think we'd break the yearly publication is if a huge topic of discussion comes up. If something like George Floyd or discrimination comes up, I feel like some of us may feel inclined to respond to the situation. If one of us feels inclined to write an opinion piece, or us as a group feels to write an opinion piece, that would be the only situation in which we would have a special edition. And if any of you don't feel comfortable writing for this publication, uh, you can feel you can feel free to contribute in any capacity that you'd like. So feel free to state your opinions on different issues, or maybe if you feel comfortable editing, you can do that as well for the publication. And for why I came up with this idea, I think as a Christian community, we should be speaking out on these issues. And my hope is that we can push these publications out to obviously our CSI churches, and then hopefully it gets shared to friends of our community, and then to our local communities and local community political leaders. I'm pretty sure some of us have political contacts that we can send it to, and local political leaders. And I know that they may not act on these issues, but at least they hear us. At least they will hear us. And hopefully they'll take the time to read it and understand the topics a little bit more better. And it would help inform them during their decision making. And it would be an opportunity for everyone that reads the publication to learn a little bit more about policy, and it educates people and it informs them. And to me, this is a form of mission work. By doing this, we're trying to help the most vulnerable people in our communities, and we're trying to be a voice for them. We're also communicating to all types of people in our communities, whoever hands this reaches, people of all religions, races, and creed. And for non-believers, maybe they'll see God's love in our publication as we speak out for the most vulnerable people in our society. Maybe this will be a calling for them as they see us doing God's work. So that was one of the ideas that I had for my society, for our society. Um, and creating a publication that comes out once a year that addresses a policy issue and applies a Christian lens. So I'm open to any feedback. Um, you guys like the idea that's being brought forward? Do you have any additions or any criticisms?
I think that's a great idea on the publication, Vishal. I'm super excited about that. Yeah, anyone have feedback, questions, comments for Vishal or for me?
If not, now that I've given you my idea for the society, do any of you have any proposals or ideas for our society for the future?
Hi. Okay, I'm just a senior, still in high school, and wanting to go into somewhere around law and government. Um, but I don't know if there are people as small as I am, since all of you are like already into the field. All I wanted to ask was, is it possible for us to like um, maybe kind of like dig into the opportunities that like upcoming people can like look into in order to make a decision for themselves. Like in law, it's such a vast field, and government is such a vast field. I really don't know where to narrow it down or something like that. So uh, I don't know how to put it down, but I was thinking if there could be something for like rising kids could like look into so as to make a decision, or for the law to lead them into something.
So sort of like a mentorship?
Yeah, sort of like, and like all the different fields that we can like sort of look into now to make a decision afterwards.
Yeah, so I think that one of the ideas that Brian had for the society is to sort of network and allow this to be an opportunity to network, and also mentor some of the younger students that we have in the society. So I know I can speak for the Canadian context and talk to any of you who are interested in policy or law in Canada. For America, I'm pretty sure that Brian can speak towards that, but that is an idea that we have to mentor some of the young students that we have that join the society. Brian, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I would say at a minimum, like something we can do just right now, for those of us who are already working, like me and you, Vishal, is just be a resource for people who have questions about law and government. I think a lot of times, especially in our community, people don't always know who they can ask without feeling like they might be bothering someone with questions. And so if we can just be like very clear that, hey, you can ask us questions, it's not a bother. We would love to help you. You know, if you have any questions about law, if you have any questions about government, you can reach out to me or Vishal. And anyone else who's willing to serve in that kind of like capacity for younger people. I think just at a minimum, we can start there. As we get more organized and network together and we're able to brainstorm ideas, like you said, Vishal, we can like formalize that a little bit. Um, you know, there might be opportunities for like internships and things like that later on. But I don't think we're at the place right now where we can do any of that. I think right now what we can do is just be there as a resource and answer your questions. And maybe give you some resources like when you're thinking, should I go to public policy school or should I go to law school? Uh, you know, I have a lot of opinions on that. Having gone to law school but working in public policy, I have some like thoughts on that I think would be relevant, especially for people in the American context. Um, so yeah, I think that's what we can do right now. It's a
Maybe,
great idea though, Kristen.
yeah. Maybe we can also have a session where we allow the students to sort of ask us questions, maybe in the coming months, about law school and public policy going forward.
All right, thank you. If I could, can you guys please put your maybe like your phone number and just your email ID into the chat so that I can
Yeah.
just.
I'll try to reach out to all of you that joined the call today, and I'll try to get your contact information. I'll reach out to you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
I don't have any questions, but like in response to like your think tank idea and like your yearly publication, I was just like wanted to say that it seemed like a really good idea, and it seemed like a really good way to like get a voice out, even at like a micro level.
Yeah, the thinking behind that is that obviously when we start off in our careers, we don't have much influence, but if we have a united voice together and speak out on these issues, hopefully it reaches the right hands and it influences policy in some way. So thank you for that comment.
I know you're like interested in law school and stuff, and we were talking, I think, a little bit more on the public policy side of things. Is there anything you'd be interested in seeing that's more like legally related that we can be thinking about?
I think all I really wanted was the same thing Chris has said, is like the mentorship, because like now I'm in the process, like this is summer before my senior year, of like LSAT studying and like law school application. And I know personally I've been like really stressed out, especially because like I was like thinking about this recently, like there's not many people in the Indian community that are in the legal field, or if they are like well into it.
Mhm.
So it's like difficult to like, but whereas like if it's like computer programming or like engineering or med school, there's like so many people to reach out to. So same thing Chris has said, I was just like, if there's like some sort of mentoring where you could just reach out and be like, this is the areas I'm lost in, and just like go for guidance, and then you feel like a little bit less lost. I think that's mainly what I'm looking for right now in terms of law school or like
Yeah,
the legal.
that totally makes sense. Any other feedback?
Oh, to say the other thing would be if I could you guys mentioned before, like sending like documents to each other on like WhatsApp and everything, and I thought it was really cool. Like I know personally, as much as I may want to go into law, I'm not like super like educated about like every policy or law that comes out. So if I could gain and I wouldn't really know where to look either. So it's like gaining access to like those type of documents or like news articles that's like connecting like the Christian sphere between like the legal aspects. I feel like that's really great because it's opening my eyes up to something I wouldn't have seen otherwise. But yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's why I'm excited for this WhatsApp group to be formed. I'm part of the medicine one just because like I'm kind of helping out with them, but like I have nothing to add really. Like I just see their messages.
Any other questions?
Or anyone just want to tell Vishal he did a really good job?
Yeah, good job, Vishal. And Ryan.
Thank you. I guess we can close off. Does Brian have any remarks or comments to add?
No, I think the next step for us is just forming that that group, Vishal, right? And then we can take it from there. So with that, I'll end the recording.